and the squad. And what he said here, I think, was really poignant and important and worth noting.
All of this is going on, but at the same time, we do have a larger than ever number of genuinely unbought, grassroots funded Democrats, progressives in Congress who did have the power in this moment to clarify the power dynamics, which are so often obscured in Congress. They don't do it. And now the left is in a position where it has to ask itself whether it's willing to make enemies of those people. I mean, I don't want to say make enemies, because that's how they will characterize it, and it's absurd. But to frankly put pressure on those people in a way that,
I think what you're saying is if they don't do it, we got to do it. I don't look at AOC as an enemy. She's been bought. I mean,
Well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean when you say that?
Well, I think her heart is probably in the right place. I don't know her. I never met her. But I don't look at her as an enemy the way I look at, Tom Cotton or somebody, or Mitch McConnell is just, two of the most venal human beings who ever walked the planet, along with Trump and Stephen Miller, who looks like something out of a Bela Lugosi film. But I think we have to be clear in terms of our understanding of how power works, that these people have been emasculated, and they've shown it. They have decided that their political career is more important than confronting the monolith, and so they're not going to confront it.
Do you really think that's what's going on with people like...
Yeah, Pelosi, these are, forget the public face. And I mean, I work for the New York Times, so I got a good look at what the inside of the machinery looks like. And these people are really vicious, vindictive figures who will destroy you if you cross them. And AOC and everyone's figured that out.
So when someone like AOC says, I would rather be a one-term congressperson, this is what she's saying when she's running. I would rather be a one-term congressperson than to forsake my values. I understand over time, even someone like Biden, who, wasn't, the grand scheme of Congress, didn't come from an affluent family, political family or anything like that. Once you're in there for 30, 40 years, yeah, you're invested. That's how you make your money. But someone like AOC, you're brand new. I, as much as I'm characterized as like being antagonistic to her, I'd be willing to give her a lot more benefit of the doubt than most, because she hasn't invested as much as a lot of other people in playing this game and staying in Congress. So that's part of why it's so confusing and frustrating when people like her, who just a year or two ago were saying, hey, I'd rather be a one-term congressperson than forsake my values. Why aren't we, it's ridiculous that Democrats haven't ever forced a vote on Medicare for all. Like, she's literally just said those things within the past 24 months, is now not choosing to leverage her power. And is it just as simple as, I want to stay in Congress, I am enjoying this $170,000 salary?
Yeah, it's that, and also the belief that my being here is better than my not being here. I mean, they'll rationalize it.
See, I think that's more of it. I think that it's very easy to say, I am doing some good, a good deal of good. And then that's better than me not being here at all, or being replaced by someone who's a lot worse.
Yeah, but she's powerless. Within the structure, she has no power at all. I mean, she has a media presence because Fox News gives it to her. They need a foil. They needed a foil for Trump. She was the foil.
Right. And the fact of a certain kind of independent democratized media, I would argue, you can say what you want about Twitter, but AOC has more Twitter followers than anybody in Congress.
Well, to quote Noam Chomsky, what can you really communicate over, 177 words or something?
Well, we got 240 characters now, so you can get a little paragraph
going. Well, there you go. There it is.
But the idea is, if you're saying, though, Chris, if you're saying that the problem is nobody's calling for mass protest, and AOC has 14 million Twitter followers or whatever it is, and we have seen the demonstrated power of her sending out a tweet and collecting millions of dollars overnight and directing millions of dollars of aid and getting boots places. She can do that. So I don't think it's fair to say that just because these people don't have power internally. I agree with you. They don't have power internally, but that's why they should be using the power of the people.
But they won't, because they'll be destroyed. They will end up. Bernie's not wrong. The machine will destroy them. I mean, look what they did to Cynthia McKinney.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a long list. That was largely over Palestine.
Right.
I mean, they're very unforgiving. I mean, you can just see example after example going all the way back to George McGovern. To 72, he gets the nomination. The Democratic leadership and the Republican leadership unite to destroy him. And then they take down his Senate seat. And he's out. He's finished.
Okay, so that was the, first, the important clip that I wanted to show you there. Just his breakdown on, he said that part of this, I agree with pretty much the entirety of this. Who am I to question Chris Hedges? I mean, he has a much deeper analysis than I do, but there were certain parts I would push back on slightly, but I think that what he said here, it definitely rings true by and large, particularly his point. The one thing that I would push back on is that he said that they were bought, right? And the one thing about that, is that under that, the way that I frame, like, to me, bought is like you are a corrupted, financially corrupted politician. You've been purchased by some wealthy or special interest group or something like that. You've been funded by them, these large donors. They essentially, through the Citizens United, which allowed unlimited donations to political campaigns, you have a legalized bribery of politicians in the U.S. political system. And we see that there are, all these corporate and establishment politicians, they are all bought by these different, major industries and corporations. The squad in AOC, they are not bought in that sense, and I just would completely disagree with that for sure. I don't believe that they are bought in that sense. They have not been bought by the fossil fuel industry or big pharma, or the gun lobby or anything, the way that the Republicans and the establishment Democrats have been bought by these industries, right? But because they get their funding, they sworn off corporate PAC money and most super PAC money and any kind of corporate money, and they take their funding from small dollar donations from everyday people, right? So they're not bought in that sense, right? And I don't think that that's the right framing of it for them and the right narrative for them. I accept it, if he means in the sense of like bought off by the career, sort of, the paycheck, the salary, the turn, sort of made complacent by it. Certainly, I think that he could mean it in that sense, and that I would agree with, and I do agree with. But I just want to make clear that I do not agree that they've been bought, and I think that it's important to be nuanced about this, because I think that it's an important point to make, to say that we thought that alone was the solution. That's what TYT and Justice Democrats, Cenk Uygur and Kyle Kulinski founded Justice Democrats with this notion of, that we were going to, the problem was that our politicians have been bought and paid for. We need to put people in Congress that aren't bought and paid for in that sense. And we did that. We did that with these candidates. And then what we've seen is that they're almost just as ineffective as these other candidates, even though I think that their intentions are entirely different. And I think that's important. And I think that Chris Hedges, he says that here, he says, I don't see them as an enemy the same way that I see Chuck Schumer or Mitch McConnell as an enemy, right? Like I don't see these people as my enemy. And I don't think, and I don't think of them that way. And Chris Hedges doesn't see them as the enemy in that sense. They're not. We just have to recognize them and be critical of them as ineffective, right? They're just ineffective. And even though they may want the same things as us, they don't have the same sense of urgency. They've lost the sense of urgency. And it's something about, we shouldn't, I don't want to have such an individualistic analysis of it where I think, oh, it's just those people, and if we change the people and put better people, stronger people in there, that's somehow going to solve the problem. I just don't believe that that's the case. I think it's a systemic problem, and systemic problems require systemic changes, and putting different people, different inputs into the same system, it doesn't change a thing. The machine is the machine, and he says it, he says these people, the machine will destroy them, right? The Democratic Party machine will destroy them. And I think that it does over time. It wears these people down. I think even, to some extent, Nancy Pelosi comes in with better intentions and more progressive when she came into Congress, and with a more, even though she was way more corrupted, that she was actually corrupted on her way in, and she was wealthy on her way in, but I think even then these people come in with more sort of just with a more progressive thought, and then slowly over time they're pushed right and through our political system. And so in this case, I think the fact that they get that $174,000 salary and good health insurance benefits, and they're the first to be vaccinated, I think that it naturally causes you to lose a sense of urgency, right? And also you rationalize these things where it's not just that. Of course, I don't think that they're just like, greedy all for themselves and they're just happy with that. But I think they also rationalize their behavior in thinking, okay, well, it's better that I stay here and I stay in this seat and fight for this incremental changes, even though their rhetoric going into this was all existential crisis. This is all existential threats and climate crisis and the economic crisis and in the public health crisis that we're facing. And these are catastrophic. And we need radical solutions to these radical problems. And then as they become a part of the system, they slowly over time, it wears them down. And all of a sudden they don't have that same rhetoric. I honestly think, sadly, I think we're about to see it happen with Nina Turner. As much as I love Nina Turner, I think that she'll be a strong voice in Congress. I just don't think that she's going to be as effective. I think once you're on the inside of that system, think you have to operate differently. And honestly, what they're lacking in the squad is a sense of an understanding of power and how to wield power. And according to Chris Hedges, he believes that they don't have power. I do think, and Breonna Gray pushed back on this, and I do think that they do have some power, and I just think that they don't have an understanding and a willingness to exercise that power. And maybe Chris Hedges is right that by its very nature, by them entering into the Democratic Party, it was all designed to work out this way. And maybe that's the truth. I thought that there might have been a chance, or else I wouldn't have invested so much of my time and energy into fighting that battle if I thought that it was a guaranteed losing fight that wasn't going to help in any way. I wouldn't have fought that battle, but I certainly believed in it and believed that that was the right way towards getting people these things that we believed we needed. We said that they were so urgent: Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, workplace democracy, a dignified living wage of at least $20 an hour at this stage, because I'm done with this talk about $15 an hour. We've been talking about $15 an hour since 2012. It's time to start talking about $20 or $25 an hour, because we really need to be talking about $25 an hour, because whenever we enact these minimum wage increases, we're talking about increasing over typically a 5-year period or more sometimes, right? So we need to be talking about $25 an hour so that it can gradually reach the point where it's supposed to be already. If it had simply kept up with inflation and productivity, we'd already be at around $23 an hour. So we need to be talking about $25 an hour minimum wage right now, and not about the 15 anymore. But I think that these, sadly, these folks go in with all these great intentions, but they don't really have a strategy to get this stuff done. And according to Chris Hedges, he just says that they've been, he said, emasculated and they're powerless. And I do think that they are rendered powerless. I think that they had some power, and they could have shown it by banding together with the small band of progressives and push back against the removal of the $15 minimum wage. And they proved then and there that they just were either unwilling or unable to meet the moment, and that they weren't going to be, and we got to stop looking for sort of these saviors from the top down, these folks to come save us. And we got to start to get real about how we're going to do it just amongst ourselves and with, and within our communities, and to start to fight the fight there. Because sadly, I think that these folks are just, they've been co-opted into a system. And even if I went into that system, I worry that even no matter that, it would chew up and spit out any of us. I met AOC before she became AOC, and before she won her primary, and I felt we talked, and it just felt like talking to any one of the folks that we talked to in this community. It just felt like talking to one of our comrades. And I know that she went in there with these same sort of intentions and pure intentions, but I think that it could happen to any of us, because you get in there and then it's all of a sudden, I better stay. And you can start to rationalize those things. And it's really easy to rationalize when you're collecting $175,000 a year and you don't got to work all that hard. And, it's not so bad. I don't want to, come across as if they don't, these people, the progressives, aren't working pretty hard. They work harder than some of these other politicians, but still not as hard as your average, laborer and working class person. So I think that when Chris Hedges speaks, I think it's important to listen, and he made some great points here. So just wanted to highlight that. All right. And Brianna Joy Gray mentioned AOC's Twitter power, and I do think that she had the power, the people behind her, but they're just unwilling to wield that power, and they don't understand and have an understanding of how to wield power. And I think that Chris Hedges agrees in that sense.